All right, so for our last sample for this class, we are going to make a soft circuit with at least one LED light, a switch with a snap right here. This is going to function as our switch, and a 3-volt battery. You should have everything in your toolkit to accomplish this project except the 3-volt battery. And our soft circuit is going to be in the form of an honorable badge that you can actually wear on your chest. And the snap will act as a switch on or off. And this will allow you to, once this is done, to wear this on your chest with either the lights on or the lights off. This is obviously not entirely finished because the embroidered piece that I have on the top here is not connected to the soft circuit itself, and that is because I haven't wanted to close it so I can show you how the pathways look for the soft circuit. And also, to finish this piece, I would need to take one of these safety pins that you have in your course kit and find a way to attach it to this in such a way that it wouldn't interfere with the conductive thread, and we will do that last. And so for this final sample, I want you guys to not only create a soft circuit with at least one LED light, a switch, but I also want you to have a front that you attach that has some sort of embroidery or image that you choose to make on your own, either through felting or through embroidery. And then, of course, I want all of you to finish it off with a safety pin attachment that does not interfere with the soft circuit itself, with the electrical components. If you wanted to make something more complicated, meaning add more lights than one, unfortunately, your toolkit probably does not have enough conductive thread. And so if you are not in Pittsburgh, you're going to be unfortunately limited just to one light, circuit with one light. If you're in Pittsburgh, I will leave this roll of conductive thread in A9, which is the office, ID8 office in the basement where you picked up your sewing machines, and you will be able to get extra thread that way. I don't know if it was my mistake with giving the length of the thread or if the library made the mistakes, but I made this sample with the thread that came with the toolkit, and honestly, it was just enough for this size badge and just enough for one light. I'm very sorry for that if you are not in Pittsburgh and you wanted to have extra lights. So I will give you instructions to how to do it with 4 lights. And here I have, this is how much more sewing there is, and it's a little bit more complicated for a badge with 4 lights. And this is how it would look in the end. So the very first thing you want to do is you want to pull out the 2 felt pieces, that square felt, synthetic felt pieces that arrived with your course kit. And all I'm going to do is just go ahead and I'm going to trace my circle. Since I already have an embroidered piece, I'm not going to go ahead and cut a blue one. You can do that on your own. In other words, I'm not demonstrating the embroidery part or the decorative part of the badge, because you should know all of the information by now on how to do it. You can do simple. This is a back stitch all the way around. I just went ahead and took a piece of paper, found a picture of a dog that looks like my dog on the internet, put the piece of paper over the screen, traced it, and then literally just pinned that piece of paper on my felt and sewed over the paper, and then removed the paper after I was done. That's the quickest, simplest way to do it. Now, you can also do applique. You can choose to make this section in felt and dry felt an image over a piece of felt. It is entirely up to you on how you produce the imagery. So we're not gonna, until the final steps on putting everything together, we're no longer gonna talk about the very front. We're really gonna focus on how to make this. And so for this purpose, I've settled on this size circle. And remember, you probably, if you are going with one light, you only have about the amount of thread that will allow you to get to this. And so I would stick with a size that's about this big. I wouldn't go any bigger. And now I'm gonna go ahead and cut out my circle. In this little diagram, and you will have a PDF that you can print for yourself, the battery is identified as a large rectangle, and it will have a minus and a plus. And if you are not used to electronic components like that, I want you to go ahead and take a marker and identify the minus and the plus on the battery itself so you don't forget, because it's going to be very important for us to follow all the directions and making sure that everything is done correctly. On this battery, it's very difficult to see, but over between the two gold little kind of little parts here, there is a little imprinted minus, and that means that this is a negative point. And we're going to go ahead and identify that for ourselves in the marker, so it's going to be very easy for us to not forget that. And so this side is negative, the side with two gold prongs, and the side with this like 3 prongs is a positive. And so on our soft circuit, this is the battery. The large rectangle is the battery. There. Now in our drawing, if you notice, these in my little drawing, these little two round pieces with markings in them, that is the switch. That is the switch with these snaps, and you should have several snaps like this in your course kit. And we're gonna make this switch first. We're gonna attach the felt that allows us to do this first. And then this is identified as your light. And I want you to notice that in this very simple circuit with a switch, and this is acting as a switch, the plus always corresponds, the positive of the battery always corresponds with the positive of the light itself, which means that you have to pay attention to how you orient your lights, your little LED lights, so that the traces that are going from the battery with a conductive thread from the positive side are going to the positive side on the light. And same goes logically since the other side of the light is going to be negative, it will go and travel towards the negative side to the battery. And the switch prevents the circuit from running, and once the switch is closed, the electricity will be able to flow, and the light will be able to turn on and off. And so if in the closed position, our switch is continuous, our trace is continuous, because the snaps are functioning, when the metal is touching and the switch is on, meaning that they're snapped, it's a continuous trace from the negative part of the battery to the negative part of the little light. And on the lights, you're going to see on the LED lights, there is a minus and a plus, and this is what you have to pay attention to. In your course kit, you should also have received 5 LED lights, and all of us will have different color lights. For these samples, I got, I think, just a white, and I believe this one is a white as well. But the LED lights, once you get them out of the plastic packet, you'll have to break each LED light off of its partners. And if you're just working with one, which we are right now, just go ahead and snip off one and let the other ones stay together. The closer, if you're going to use all of them, the closer you get to the end, the more difficult it's going to be to snap. And you might need to get creative in how to separate them, but it's totally doable. Okay, so in this case, I have my LED light and I can see that this is a positive side. So I'm just gonna go ahead and place it on my drawing the way it's supposed to be, like that. The only difference here is that in this drawing, this is giving us the simple map of all the traces and how everything is put together. But in reality, I have two surfaces, two planes that I'm working with. So the light itself will be attached on the fabric like this. So if I'm looking at this piece like this, my light is facing out, right? So it's positioned like this on the back. And you can see that. All right, now that we have all of our components, actually we don't, I want you to pull out a needle just for normal sewing from your needle toolkit, and then go ahead and cut out a piece of square of synthetic felt like that so you can put your needle in just for this project so it's easy to keep track of it. And I also want you to pull out a special needle from the pack of like various needles, the felting needles, the extra sewing needles. There should be one tiny little special needle, and what's special about it is that it can pass through the opening on the battery. It is actually somewhat difficult to find the needles that will pass through a 1 millimeter opening. Most of the needles have eyes that are bigger. And whenever you order kits like that, you have no idea if you're gonna have a needle that matches it. So I had to order a specific kind of needle that would be appropriate for sewing and passing through the battery holder itself. And so I want you guys to set your two needles aside. I want you to pull out a normal piece of thread. Since I'm working with white felt, I'm pulled out white thread, so it's not, so you won't be able to see where I'm attaching the felt to the synthetic felt to synthetic felt. So I'm gonna have this on the side. I want you to pull out the snaps. This is gonna be your switch, your safety pins, your cutout piece of badge that will hold the circuit. And I think we're ready to go. And of course, pull out your conductive thread. The very first thing we're gonna do to create this circuit is to attach this little this little switch section. And for that, I'm gonna go ahead and cut a rectangle from my synthetic felt. I'm gonna go ahead and eye it, but it's really maybe 1.5 centimeters by 5 or 6, something like that. And I just eyed it. And I'm gonna go ahead and bend it in half. And I want once it's bent in half, I want it to be approximately the length of the battery holder. So that, because the battery is gonna be here and the switch is gonna be right underneath it, okay? And this seems pretty reasonable in terms of functionality for you to turn it on and off like that. Size-wise, that seems very, very comfortable. And so the very first thing we're going to do is we're gonna go ahead, since I'm making one LED piece here, I'm gonna go ahead and move my battery lower than here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and position my felt switch underneath it. I want this to be a strong connection, so I'm going to go ahead and tie the knot on 2 threads, on 2 ends, rather than just one. And I'm going to go ahead and snip the end right away. I do not want to have any extra tails on this project. And I'm going to use a back stitch to connect my switch holder felt to the main synthetic felt piece that's going to hold the circuit. My position right now next to the camera is very awkward, and it's very difficult for me to actually have control over what I'm doing, but it should still work. In this assignment, I don't need you to be perfect with what you're doing. What I want you is to be neat. It's going to be very important to follow instructions on how to make the traces and making sure that you are cutting off all the loose tails and are being as neat as possible. Okay, so once I have that connected, I'm going to go ahead and create 2 knots. Because I want that piece to be nice and secure. Here goes my first knot. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a second knot. Like that. And I'm going to make sure that the knot sits next to the surface of the felt as much as possible. And then I'm going to cut off the tail just like that. Again, it's going to be very important for you to cut off all the tails quite close to the surface, especially with conductive thread. All right, so now I have my switch holder ready to go. And now it's time for us to actually start talking about using the conductive thread and working with it. And so my battery, if I look at the schematic here and my map, is going to be sitting right above my switch. And so I am going to be, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually, instead of working with the battery, I'm going to go ahead and attach my switches. And there's a particular way that these interconnect. The snaps, you have to make sure that you connect them, you attach them in the correct position so they can actually snap. And I myself made a mistake on the second circuit that I made, and I positioned one of them in the wrong orientation. So now it actually, yes, I can turn it on, but it will never snap close until I reorient it. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to change it because it does light up and that's what I care about. But for your purposes, you really want to make sure that you orient your parts correctly. And this would be the correct orientation, like that. And so since this part is the one that it's very easy to make a mistake on, I'm going to go ahead and start attaching it with my conductive thread first. So I'm going to take my conductive thread, and the conductive thread that you have in your course kit is a lot thinner than the one I'm working with. It's just a different manufacturer, but they will work the same. And I lost my needle threader, so I'm going to go ahead and try to thread this just with my eye. There it goes. Okay, I'm going to work with a single thread, meaning that when I knot the end, I'm going to knot only on one thread. I'm not going to double it up. And you want to be very economical with this thread. For one, it's expensive, but most importantly, you really don't have a lot of it for the purposes of your sample. And so I'm gonna say this once, and I'm gonna kind of probably remind you multiple times again, but for the purposes of the soft circuits, it's very important that you cut off any loose tails immediately. You don't want to wait and forget about them. And the reason is why, because if these tails are really long, they can create short circuit very easily. And we really, when creating this circuit, we want to make sure that our traces are correct and there's no intermingling of fibers anywhere, because we are working with a conductive thread and electricity will be running through it. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the bottom piece, at least 1 or 2 links. So you see that there's 4 spots to attach it, and we want to actually attach all 4 of them. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. Start doing that. Just like that. And what's going to be important here is to have a good, strong connection. And so for all of the parts that you're going to be sewing, it's going to be very important for you to create a nice and solid connection so that there is so that the conductive thread is really connected with the components that you're sewing. You don't want to have too much looseness. And so in the beginning, what I like to do after going through that opening a couple of times, I like to kind of pull on my thread and then secure that connection with a knot, just so that there's very little looseness. And I'm not going to double knot. I'm just going to do 1 knot. And don't pull on this thread very hard at the same time. You can really snap it. And so once I have that securely connected, I'm going to go in, back through the felt, and then move to the next connection from underneath. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass through here and do the same, do couple passes. And I recommend that you work alongside with me, just because so that you have a friend working along with you, alongside you. Here we have. I went twice around, and I'm going to go ahead and connect the knot here. And I'm passing through the felt and some of the fibers that are conductive, but mostly through the felt. And that is wrong, so sorry. I'm going to go ahead and undo it. And since we have a single thread, I can actually easily accomplish that. And I'm working with way more thread that you will have. And again, if you're in Pittsburgh, you'll be able to get some of extra thread from the office. There it is. And then I can snip. And then when I'm snipping it, I'm going to snip it all the way to the surface. Okay, so now it's time for me to attach this piece over here of the snap. And notice how this is the correct orientation, right? So this way I can actually snap them and they will have a good bond. They'll making a knot, making sure my knot is nice and tight on the end, and I'm gonna snip the tail all the way to the knot. Now, after I'm done attaching this guy, I'm gonna go ahead and travel with my trace to the end here, and then travel to the battery. So I'm gonna make the connection from here to here all at once, okay? So that means I'll be attaching the battery at the very end as well. Alternatively, you could attach the battery first, start at the battery, travel to the end here, and attach the second snap. And actually, let's go ahead and do that. And so remember, we marked our battery, and this is the negative side. On our little schematic here, this is the negative side as well. So we've identified, we've matched the switch to the negative side. And so to attach the attach the battery holder, you need to pass through that little hole here on the battery holder side and really come through several, I would say 2 to 3 times as well. I'm gonna do 3 just so you guys get to see it. And again, a tight connection is very important. Very good knots are very important. And I'm gonna go ahead and do 3 passes. Okay. Sometimes it's going to be difficult to find the opening blindly, so you'll have to kind of place your needle in a general area and find your way through. Okay, so this is 2 passes, and just like with the snap, I'm going to go ahead and secure this connection by creating a little knot. It doesn't have to be a double knot, it can just be a single knot, and that will secure my conductive thread around the battery opening. And if you still feel like it's a little too loose, go ahead and just make another pass through the opening. Oh, and see what I did? That is wrong. So thankfully I can push my needle through. Where I need to go is through to the back and then through the opening. There we go. And then you can put another knot. And I'm being overly cautious here just so I can duplicate the process and really kind of get the information to you, so that it's really important from whenever you're making transitions with this conductive fiber from one element to another. You really want to secure the transition with a little knot so there is not much movement. And so that also if there's going to be, if your conductive thread breaks at some point between the components, that it would be easy for you to reconnect everything by resewing that trace. And that way the battery is secure and you can easily connect to it in case of a breakage. And so to make the traces themselves, these straight lines, we're really just going to use a running stitch. And so that's once we secure the side of the battery, connecting to here should be very simple. And I'm going to go ahead and just sketch it out for you on the felt itself. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. Okay, then I'm going to create a knot at this point because this is the transition point. It's going to get a lot of movement, and then I'm going to move here and connect this other side of the snip on the inside of the switch holder. And so this is going to be very simple. This is just a simple running stitch. Nothing fancy about it. You don't have to make it into a back stitch. I mean, you could, but there's no reason to make it into a back stitch. And here I'm going to, in fact, speed up the process. And you can see on the back that it's just a simple running, basting running stitch. And again, when I get to the switch holder at this fold, I want to go ahead and secure my, with a knot. And this one I'm going to make a double knot. Okay, and now I'm gonna run to a running stitch. I'm gonna go through the fold and then do a running stitch just on this flap to the area where the second part of the snap is gonna be connected. And then I'm gonna connect the snap. Just like that. Take that and start connecting the snap. Now, I have to make sure that this is not too high, not too low. It looks perfectly fine when I close it, and so now I can start concentrating on connecting it. And so this thread, the conductive thread, will have a tendency to knot a little bit more than usually. So you'll have to, again, be very patient with it, and because you don't have a lot of it, give it some time and not rush through it. There we go. Okay, so this is a good example where I made a mistake and something knotted without my knowledge, and that's okay. We are going to go ahead and, because we have those knots, we can go ahead and remove this loop that ended up there. Just like that, because nothing should be lost because everything is connected through this metal plate anyway. And the knots that we had secured to the top here should be good enough to hold everything together. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and secure a knot here on the back. I'm going to make it a double knot and then cut off the end. Okay. So here I am. I can cut this off now, like that. And my switch is connected. My snaps are working. There we go, my snap is working. The next step is to start working on the LED, attach the LED, and then run the trace from the LED to the other side of the battery. And so this is a very short trace. And first I'm going to go ahead and put a knot on my conductive thread. And again, you want to remove all tails from conductive thread for this assignment. It's very important not to have any loose fibers, conductive fibers anywhere. All right, so at this point we have a choice of starting from the positive side of the battery holder and creating a running stitch or a trace to the LED light. And instead of starting at the LED light, I'm going to go ahead and adjust that and also secure the battery holder. Go ahead and close the snip for that, the turn on off switch, so it's not in your way. And let's go ahead and attach the battery holder. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and knot it. And again, notice how I'm passing through the felt, so I secure that the kind of that fiber with the synthetic felt. Since I'm continuing with the running stitch right after that, I'm going to go ahead and just make one knot rather than a double knot, a single knot. That will be, so this is what happens with this. This is what can happen with this thread. When that happens, it's okay. Just cut off anything that's loose. Remove it from your circuit. Surface, re-knot, and start again. And I'm going to go ahead and secure it now with a knot a little bit more carefully. One. This one I'm just going to go ahead with two since I broke the other one. I'm a little worried. So, and maybe that was not the smartest idea because this knot is nice and loose now. But there's enough fiber there to allow the conductivity to continue. So this should be good enough. And if we look at our diagram, we're going to make basically a running stitch to this section. Okay, at this point I'm going to go ahead and kind of visualize where I want my battery to be. And so you can imagine it's going to be on the opposite end, somewhere there. And so I need to make sure that my trace goes up now as a result. Just like that. And at this point, I can go ahead and remember that this is running from the positive side, so we have to connect to the positive on the battery. And here we are. We're going to attach it right there. And now we're going to go ahead and run and attach the light. Please note that the LED light is actually in this little rectangular form that's sticking out, so that has to face out if you want to see the light. And remember, you don't want to have any looseness. So like once this is nice and tight here, and once you get a couple stitches to connect the light to the synthetic felt, you want to go ahead and put a knot so that there's not as much movement anymore, right? So that the stitches can't go anywhere. And then one more, and then a double knot. One, and two, and carefully push it to the surface. And at this point, we can cut off the end all the way to the knot. Okay, and so now we have connected from here, and the last thing we need to do is connect from the negative side of the light to the bottom of our switch. Okay, so we will have to go from here around and to here. And once we connect to this bottom metal snap, we can later then use our normal threads to run a couple of stitches to hold the switch holder in place so it's not wobbly. So we're not just relying on the connection that's created from the trace itself. And so at this point, my thread is running very low, but I'm gonna go ahead and try to make it. Again, all tails must be snipped, like that. And so I'm starting to run a thread a little bit, and I wanted to actually, for that to happen, so I can talk to you how to connect to a trace. And so since I'm very low in fiber on the thread here, on the conductive thread, it makes no sense for me to go on because I will not have enough thread to finish. And so at this point, I'm going to create a very distinctive knot at the end of my trace so that I can connect the next after I thread my needle so I can connect to the same spot. And I'm going to go ahead and create this very distinctive area by stitching a couple knots several times. Okay, just like that. I'm going to cut the end all the way to the knot, and I'm going to rethread my needle and finish this up. And to reconnect to this spot, I'm going to go ahead and run through the knot or very close to it and then kind of embroider over it with my conductive thread a couple times, and that will allow me enough connection so that the electricity can continue running through it. Okay, and after passing a couple of times, a little knot will do the trick to finish the connection, and then we can go on traveling forward. Okay, and so here we are. We want to travel forward. Just like that. And I'm going to go all the way to here. Of course, you could also just connect to this side. But since I have the extra thread that you might not have, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And voila, cutting to the end of the knot. And let's go ahead and install the battery and see if it worked. Okay, the battery has two sides. You want to have the side that has the writing on it facing you, and you want to push it in this way. Okay, so the battery's in and our light is on. So we have done a simple circuit with a switch now. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the battery, and let's pretend that at this point you have already finished the front of your badge, right? Just like me, I already have my badge. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and again connect the bottom of the switch holder. Over here we want to put two like a little bit of a knot here and a little bit of a knot here to connect the switch holder to the back, so that when you are using this switch, it's mostly held by a normal thread. And again, we don't want any loose ends. We want good knots, not a knot like that. So I'm going to go ahead and redo that. Okay, and then I'm going to cut off anything that's loose. Like that. All right, so now I can close off my switch. And the next thing for us is to decide where we want to have the safety pin. And the way we are going to attach also the safety pin is by using another piece of small felt piece. Because remember, we have to make sure that the safety pin is not interfering with the circuit, because it's metal. If we just attach it on top of our soft circuit in the back here, it will interfere. And it can cause, it can be dangerous actually. So what we need to do is we need to create an area to separate. We need to use the synthetic felt to separate the two surfaces. So in my case, we can make a decision to put the light either on the bottom or the top, but most importantly, we need to make sure that we have enough space to attach it, to attach the safety pin. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and keep the light on the bottom and attach the safety pin to the top. And so this will be the placement of my safety pin. I'm going to go ahead and keep this piece this large because I can cut it off later after I sew it together. But instead of just sewing the safety pin directly, I'm going to cut another piece of felt and use that to connect the two pieces. And so if I take this and I open the safety pin, it's very clear that the opening that has the part of the safety pin that has the opening has to be on the top, and then the other part can be attached. And so all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making a stitch here and a stitch here, and then I will remove the excess after I make that stitch. And I'm gonna do a back stitch so it's a little bit more secure again. I'm looking for my thread. And so now I'm going to go ahead again, place my safety pin. The part of the safety pin that has the opening is going to go on top. I'm going to make a seam right here. And now my safety pin is attached, And all I have to do is remove the excess felt here. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this above the stitch, just like that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and flip this around and cut around the perimeter. Just like that. Okay, the last thing we need to do to finish this is to attach our beautiful embroidery to the back. And again, the orientation is going to be important. I can feel that my light is here, and I feel like that's really good. In your toolkits, you received, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the embroidery thread that you all received in your toolkits. And here are the embroidery threads. These are called skeins. And I want to talk to you about how to open them up. Obviously, I'm going to personally use a blanket stitch to connect this embroidery to my soft circuit. And first thing, I'm going to decide on the color I want to use. And I'm not really happy with any of the colors that are offered, so I'm going to go back and use the color that I used for the embroidery. But in general, whenever you want to use embroidery, you want to go ahead and remove the pieces of paper that are holding the embroidery together, and you want to carefully open up the fibers because they are actually in a, how can I say this? They're actually neatly put together, and you want to keep it this way. If you're prone to kind of throwing things around a little bit and not being very neat, I do recommend that you transfer this embroidery thread onto something like this so it doesn't knot and become unruly. But in general, there was a video that I asked you guys to watch. In general, for embroidery thread, you can work with thicknesses that the embroidery thread comes with, or embroidery floss, or alternatively, you can also split the fibers into however many pieces of fibers you want. And so you can see that the ends come open very loosely, and if you wanted only 3 thickness or 2 thickness of fiber, you go ahead and open it up carefully, unwind it into the thicknesses of fibers that you want. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and attach it with the thick, with all 6 layers of threads. And I'm going to go ahead and use that. For that, I will need to switch to a thicker needle. I just successfully hid the end thread. Okay, so now moment of truth. Let's go ahead and put in the battery. And here we have our badge that can actually hang on a piece of clothing with one light, with one LED light. So we've just completed the simple badge with soft circuit with one LED light and a switch, just like that. If you wanted to make, I'm gonna put the switch this way. If you wanted to make a badge with 4 lights or 5 lights, I'm gonna go ahead and I will have a little map in a PDF form for you on how to do the circuit, parallel circuit for multiple lights. And I've reconfigured it for a circular format so it's easier for you to follow. Typically, if you are gonna look in the books or online, you'll find something like that. And this would be a parallel circuit with multiple lights. But it's in the square format and it's clearly not going to work with all the different components that we have here. And because this is circular and the lights have to be, they're not right next to each other, the way we run the traces has to be very specific. And so if you wanted to make multiple light circuit, this is the diagram I would use for a circular badge. And there will be a PDF under this video for this. All right, this is the last sample that you will be making. I hope you enjoyed the class. I hope you've learned some useful skills and you'll be able to transfer them into your studies and use them for either pleasure or, something else, projects, useful projects in the other classes. Good luck.